Hey there, welcome back to The Truth is Somewhere, where we talk about conspiracy theories and other things in that area. Megan, what are we talking about today?
Today, we're going to talk about Titanic.
Titanic.
Yeah. Which is something that I didn't even realize there were conspiracy theories about. Like, I should have. Like, logically, something on that scale is probably going to have some conspiracy theories, but I hadn't really thought about it until I started doing research on other conspiracy theories and then came across stuff about Titanic, and I was like,
Makes sense.
That seems interesting.
Do you think they crashed into a UFO?
I do not think they crashed into a UFO,
No?
No.
Ah, come on.
No. And there are no aliens this time, spoiler alert. Sorry to disappoint.
There are always aliens.
There are always aliens, but there are no aliens in my research today.
Mm-hmm.
No aliens.
Okay. So, where does this epic adventure start?
Well, so it starts with the history, of course.
Let's start with some
history. Begin at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
In the early 20th century, White Star Line commissioned one of the biggest and most luxurious ships in the world, the RMS Titanic. She was born out of a competition between White Star Line and the British firm Cunard. Yes. Or Cunard. I don't know. Cunard?
I don't know.
Anyway, Cunard's Mauretania set the speed record for fastest average speed during the transatlantic crossing, and she held that title for 22 years. The year that...
Sorry, that's my pen.
Jeez. The year that Mauretania and her sister ship, the Lusitania, which coincidentally would be sunk by a German U-boat in May of 1915, killing 1,200 passengers and pushing the U.S. into World War I.
Okay.
The CEO of White Star Line discussed the building of 3 large ships that would become known as the Olympic-class ocean liners, with the company Harland and Wolff. These Olympic liners would be 882 feet in length and 92.5 feet at their widest point, making them the largest of their kind.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Side note.
Pretty big boat.
We went to the Titanic exhibit when we were in Vegas.
Oh, yeah.
And they had a Titanic exhibit in the Luxor Hotel at the time. And they had a piece, like a tiny little piece of the Titanic
right. And
there.
It was huge.
And this tiny little piece was huge. Like, they had a map of what a schematic of what the ship would have looked like. And they were like, this piece that takes up this whole fucking room was like an inch on the schematic.
Yeah.
And
it was pretty huge.
It was crazy. Like, it's nothing compared to, like, the ships that we see now.
Sure.
But still, like, if you've never seen something that big, like, holy fuck.
It was pretty huge,
That's a big ship. That was a big ship. Anyway. Titanic started her maiden voyage from Southampton, England to New York in the U.S. on April 10th, 1912. And on April 14th, just 4 days into her trip, the Titanic struck an iceberg. While lookouts were able to see the berg in time to avoid a head-on collision, the ship still grazed the iceberg at surface level, and a jagged piece of the berg tore a 300-foot gash in the hull below the waterline.
Okay.
The ship had been built with a state-of-the-art technology that made experts proclaim her unsinkable. She had a double bottom and 15 watertight bulkhead compartments that had electric watertight doors that could be controlled individually and simultaneously by a switch on the bridge.
Okay.
So that all sounds really, really great. Like,
sure.
The ship's not going to sink. Like, if one of these gets breached, like, everything closes and water's not going to pass, but they forgot something important.
Oh.
So the walls between the bulkhead compartments, the watertight bulkhead compartments, didn't go, like, all the way up. The walls stopped just above the waterline.
Oh, okay.
So, if you pitched or you had any list at all, and there was water in those compartments, it would spill over the wall into the next one.
That makes sense. That's not good.
Yeah. Which is pretty much, yeah.
That's a big
Not
oversight.
really watertight. Not really watertight at that point.
It's like having a watertight box without a lid.
Yeah, totally. That's kind of how I felt. I was like, how could you claim that these are watertight if you left, like, big gaps at the top of them?
Yep.
That doesn't make any sense. But by the time the captain and a representative from Harland and Wolff were able to inspect the damage to Titanic's hull, 5 of the bulkhead compartments were already flooded, and the ship was pitched downward, which just allowed water to flow.
Keep coming, yeah.
From one bulkhead to another over those walls. The representative from Harland and Wolff, Thomas Andrews, estimated that the ship would be able to stay afloat for only an hour and a half at that point.
Wow.
So they're like, we have an hour and a half.
That's no time at all.
The Titanic was carrying 2,240 passengers and crew that April, but only had 28 lifeboats with a 65-person capacity. So I did the math. They only had enough lifeboats for roughly 1,800 people.
That makes sense. Funny enough, not funny, but I think I was just reading it. Maybe I just watched a video that talked about because of the Titanic sinking and its 65% rating for those escape pods.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they're called.
Lifeboats, escape pods.
I've been watching some sci-fi lately. Anyways, lifeboats. That they actually made it law that all ships have to have
enough for their passengers.
But so they started retrofitting ships with a bunch of these boats,
mm-hmm.
and the problem is not those boats weren't all rated to have that on the side of them. So any boats designed after that point had that considered in making the ship so that they could handle that. So actually what ended up happening was a couple ships capsized.
Well, what's crazy
and it caused more accidents.
Yeah.
Because the Titanic went down, more ships went down.
Yeah. What's crazy is that the Titanic was designed to carry more lifeboats than that. Like, they had the space for it, but they literally went, no, it'll take up too much space from the first class passenger decks. Like, we want them to have more space to walk around and be hobby snobby.
Makes sense.
And so they, right off the bat, 400 people without a hope.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, right off the bat, 400 people. A little over 400 people.
Mm-hmm.
Because they could only take 1,800 people in their lifeboats. Yeah. What's worse, though, is that they were really unorganized in their emergency preparedness.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they did not have a continuity of operations plan at all, apparently, on this ship. And because of this lack of organization, they launched several of the lifeboats woefully underfilled, and some of them even just had a handful of people on them, like a handful.
Wow! Instead
of the 65 they could carry, and there were a lot of things where like the first class people didn't want to be like squished in.
Yeah, well,
and so they were like,
those peasants.
Yeah, so they were like, oh no, we'll make sure that everyone's nice and comfortable. But they were already lacking enough lifeboats for everyone on the ship, and then they were like, oh, there's 5 people on this boat, send it down.
Wow!
What the fuck?
Yep.
Right. So the crazy thing is the Titanic ended up staying afloat for almost 3 hours, which is double what Andrews had predicted, and he was one of the ones who helped design that ship. Like, he knew it backwards and forwards, so, like, they had a lot more time than he had initially given, which is great. And it finally sunk at about 2:20 a.m. on April 15th, and that morning, they got there about 4 a.m. Cunard's Carpathia... Oh, sorry, I just spit all over you. Rounded up with the survivors in the lifeboats after responding to Titanic's midnight distress call. Because they were, like, navigating through the icebergs themselves, and they were going, like, full speed, navigating icebergs, trying to get to this distress call. So they round up all of the lifeboats, and there's only 705 people in them.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
That is...
devastating.
Disgraceful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That is, That's not a good number.
No.
That's the kind of numbers that puts a business out of business.
Except that what's crazy is they didn't go out of business.
Yeah, they should have, though.
Nuts. So over 1,500 people ended up dying.
Yeah.
In this. So it's interesting because I've been, like, borderline obsessed with the Titanic since I was a little kid. Mm-hmm. Like, I was so fascinated by this story. It's really morbid and really odd for a small child to be this, like, fascinated by something like this. But I don't think that I ever really looked at Titanic by the numbers.
Yeah. Because
children don't. Like, we can't fathom those kind of numbers. And I'm sure that I've seen them before, but I just didn't, like, recognize what.
I was just thinking I'm sure some of the people in the Titanic fathomed it.
It's bad. It's bad. So
bad. One of our tags is dark humor, right?
Yeah. Anyway, the point was that, like, just looking at those numbers, it's fucking astounding.
Yeah.
Like, so they have 2,200 on board. They can only take 1,800 on lifeboats, and they only put fucking 705 people on those lifeboats.
They don't even reach
half what those lifeboats
and they had more
hold.
Than, they had almost 3 times the amount of time that they thought they were going to have.
No, 2 times. An hour and a half to 3 hours.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I thought it was less than an hour and a half. But anyways, yeah.
Yeah. It's astounding. So we're going to get into some theories about why this may have happened. Other than it just being a really horrible, tragic accident.
Yeah, I had, I'd seen some stuff a long time ago. Who hasn't seen something about the Titanic?
Yeah.
Right. Are you going to talk about mirages at all?
No, I wasn't going to talk about mirages at all because that's one of the like prevailing like this probably is actually what happened.
Okay, so we're not going to talk about.
We're not going to talk about the prevailing. We're talking a little bit more about.
Okay,
like,
we're getting
things that we think didn't actually happen.
We're going down deep and.
Would you like to talk about the mirages real quick though? Because I know that you know a little bit about that.
Well, I mean, it just has to do with light diffraction, and essentially different pressures and different temperatures cause the local atmosphere to change and cause the light to do different things. So there's a good chance that iceberg snuck up on them.
Like they just couldn't.
I think if I remember correctly, there was actually another ship in the area that had claimed to have seen the Titanic, but they weren't sure if they were seeing it or if they were seeing a mirage. And also, with proper diffraction of light, I mean, the Titanic could essentially be invisible but be very close because the light is being bent back down.
Yeah. That ship, I think, was actually from Nova Scotia. And I think it was a fishing vessel, if I remember correctly. And they actually heard the call for, like, the distress signal and didn't go. They sailed the opposite direction.
Whoops.
Yeah.
How nice of them.
Yep.
Those Nova Scotians. Not to insult anyone that's a Nova Scotian. I'm just speaking to speak. So, it's known for a fact that on the day the Titanic went on her first and last voyage, that there was a coal fire on board, which isn't unheard of. Like, in a steamship that is powered by coal. Oh, yeah. An old very common. Back then. And after assessing the situation and concluding that it was unlikely that the fire caused any significant damage to the hull, the strokers were ordered to control the fire while at sea. So just, like, get it under control, keep it under control, we're still going. Okay. It's time to go. Oh, so there was a fire on the ship as well. Yeah. Okay. And that's, like, very well known. Very well documented there was a fire on board. Okay. So some people believe that this fire did indeed cause significant damage to the hull, leading to the sinking of the ocean liner. Like, that possibly, like, weakened that section that hit the iceberg. Did the coal fire happen in that section? I have no idea. Okay. That would make sense. You take metals and you heat them up and cool them down, especially very quickly. You make them brittle. Yeah. Well, and some people think that the steel wasn't even rated for that cold of water in the first place. Like, or whatever a ship is made of. I assumed steel, but I don't know. No, I mean, back then probably was some form of steel. So, but some people were saying that they think that it's possible that it wasn't rated to be in that cold of water in the first place. Which I think is probably bullshit, because, like, they made 3 of these. They made 3 of these Olympic-class ships. Yeah, I very seriously doubt that they didn't rate it to travel through icy Atlantic waters. That just doesn't make sense. Okay. But others believe that the fire became uncontrollable, which forced the captain to push the ship to travel at a pace that would make it impossible to avoid the collision with the iceberg. And that's something that they know, that they were traveling full speed. They went full speed ahead. Okay. Which is another reason, like, why people say, like, there's no way this guy was gonna see the iceberg in time. Okay. Because they were going too fast. It was dark. It's fucking cold. Yeah. Like, and all the things you just mentioned, the science-y stuff. Yeah. Like, he wasn't gonna see it in time. Okay. He saw it soon enough to say, go that way! And they didn't head-on collide with it. That's literally the only thing that they were able to do. They just barely didn't, as far as the movie shows. And supposedly, actually, James Cameron's movie is, like, remarkably historically accurate. To what actually happened. Like, the only thing that's really made up is Rose and Jack. Like, their whole, like, love story thing is entirely fabricated. But, like, as far as what actually happened on the Titanic, supported by the survivors' records of it, that's what actually happened. And that was, like, that movie was a, I wouldn't call it a milestone, but, like, it was definitely a product of its era. Yeah. Think about it, didn't Pearl Harbor come out kind of around the same time? Yeah, like, really long, epic. Historically accurate with a, like, slight flair. Like, tragic love story. Long. Within this historically accurate story. Sure. Yeah, based on a true story. Yeah. Yeah. I also really liked both of those movies, actually. Yeah, they're kind of chick flicks. Yeah, I guess a little bit. Yeah, my dad really liked both of those movies. I mean, there's nothing wrong about liking a chick flick, but those movies, I think, were made with women in mind. Sure. I think that was the whole reason there was a love story on it. But anyways.
Anyway, moving on. So that is the most plausible theory we're going to talk about, is this fire theory.
Okay.
And it is not generally the accepted one of what happened. Like, the Mirage thing is what's generally accepted. Because I think that was even in our tour of the Titanic exhibit, was that Mirage thing.
I think you're right.
I think it was in that tour. Another theory suggests that the Titanic sinking wasn't an accident. I know. Dun dun dun. Theorists claim that 3 of the ship's passengers, John Jacob Astor IV, Benjamin Guggenheim, and Isidor Straus, were opposed to the creation of the Federal Reserve Bank.
Okay.
And because these particular men had so much pull, their deaths smoothed the way for the Federal Reserve Bank's creation in 1913, so a year later. Astor was the richest man aboard the Titanic and was thought to be one of the richest men in the world at the time, with a net worth of $87 million, which is $2.21 billion in today's money.
So there's nothing wrong. I would agree that they might have actually had some sort of pull on the Federal Reserve Bank, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, on political decisions in general, because they were very rich, influential, powerful men.
I would say, like, yes, it makes sense that those people dying would have a large effect on it, but that doesn't mean
sink a whole ship.
You're gonna sink a whole ship to kill them. Would have been a lot less messy and a lot easier if they just sent a guy with a gun to go shoot them when they weren't expecting it.
But then it doesn't look like an accident.
Who cares what it looks like?
I was gonna give you
not making decisions anymore. You could do what you need to make it look like a decision. Or accident, not a decision. Yeah.
Like car accidents or something like that. You could do a lot more that wouldn't endanger quite so many people.
Right.
But I wanted to give a quick rundown of who these people were. Mm-hmm. So Astor was the richest man, possibly one of the richest men in the world at the time.
Okay.
Benjamin Guggenheim, as in the Guggenheim Museum, came from a prominent family who made their money in mining. And when Benjamin realized how serious the situation on the Titanic was, he and his chauffeur helped women and children board the lifeboats, returned to their room, donned formal attire, and Guggenheim is quoted as having said, quote, "We are dressed in our best and are prepared to go down like gentlemen."
Wow.
Yeah. What a badass.
That guy's my hero. Today.
Right? Like, what a badass.
Guggenheim?
He's like, I'm gonna dress nicely, and I'm gonna die dressed nicely. Like,
yeah.
Hell yeah.
Guggenheim, right?
Guggenheim.
He's like,
Benjamin
people are gonna remember my name because it's my name, but I'm not as silly as my name would suggest.
Yeah, totally.
Uh-huh.
Like, what a badass. Like, he's like, I've helped all these women and children on these boats, and I'm gonna go down looking my best.
Heck yeah.
Yeah.
A little
pretty
vain,
cool.
But yeah.
Really, like,
but you know,
what a badass.
Vain in the way that, like, I've done my part. I can be vain now.
Yeah. And like, if I'm gonna die anyway.
What am I? We're just standing around. Like, let's look good while we're gonna die. Yeah, I like it.
Yeah. And then Isidor Straus was the owner of Macy's at the time. Mm-hmm. And despite having been offered a seat on a lifeboat due to his advanced age, Straus refused, and his wife Ida refused to leave his side. Isidore and Ida returned to their cabin and presumably passed together in their cabin when the ship went down.
So this whole taking the ship down to take them down seems less credible now that these people were...
like, not assholes.
Yeah, they were known for the ones that were, like, they had the chance to get on the boats. They could have gotten on the boats, they could have gotten away, but they didn't. You really have to bank on the fact that honorable people are going to be honorable in a time of stress and danger, which is rare.
Yeah. Well, the idea, though, is that all 3 of them were men.
Yeah.
And you took women and children first.
Sure.
So the idea is that you wouldn't have technically had, like, because they didn't have enough lifeboats on board, the men probably weren't going to get to go.
Okay.
Because the women and children were going to go. Astor's wife was actually, Astor. She was pregnant. She was 29 years younger than he was, and she was pregnant, and he asked to go with her because she was pregnant, and they told him no.
Oh.
Yeah. So, there are other versions of the theory of it's not an accident and it was done on purpose, and one of them was that they were opposed to income tax legislation, and again, they had a lot of pull. You're right, it seems too big.
Yeah.
Because there were 2,000 other people that got killed. You know, like, there were, 1,500 other people that died over this. Like, that just doesn't make sense.
I know we'll tackle it at some point.
Mm-hmm.
But this is kind of how I feel about the World Trade Center.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's like...
it's too big.
It's too big. Like...
Mm-hmm.
Well, I know we'll talk about it more at some point.
We'll get there eventually.
I know it's on the list. I know we'll get there.
Mm-hmm.
But, like, you have to be really, really evil.
Yeah.
To say, yeah, I'll sink the ship with this many people on it.
Yeah.
So that I get things to go the way I want them to. Like...
You're right.
That's...
Evil, like J.P. Morgan?
Ooh, what about J.P. Morgan?
Like the banker?
Yeah.
Well, I guess there was some sort of disagreement between him and these three guys. I don't know. And some theorists think that he lured them onto the Titanic. Like, he was supposed to be on it, but he canceled his trip last minute.
I think I've heard that, yeah.
He canceled his trip last minute because he had some sort of business concerns come up. And
Evil
then he wasn't on it. Evil business concerns that had to do with sinking the ship. That's what some people think. I don't buy into this. Somebody was so awful that they sunk a ship for three guys. Like, that's nuts. That's just nuts. But another theory, because of Titanic's advanced engineering, some theorists believe that she became the target of outside forces. Mm-hmm. These theorists suggest that the Titanic had a fate similar to Cunard's Lusitania.
Okay, I don't know what...
I brought that up earlier.
Oh, yeah,
Yep.
Okay. Yeah.
Supposedly, several survivors of Titanic's sinking heard explosions after the ship had begun to sink, and some saw a searchlight in the distance long before the arrival of the rescue ship, and theorists think a German U-boat possibly sunk the ship in order to hurt the U.S.
I mean, that's possible, but explosions can be written off pretty easily. You're creating huge you're creating huge air pockets in a ship as it's going down. It might be so much that you're busting through wooden floors, and when that or whatever the floors are made out of, and then suddenly that creates an explosion sound. Just the fact something breaking, snapping in a ship,
split in half before it went down.
Can make it go boom.
Yeah,
make that sound
like an explosion. Yeah. I mean, it just seems weird because the Lusitania was actually sunk by a U-boat.
Sure.
3 years later. So it's kind of like, why didn't we enter World War I at this point if a U-boat had sunk the Titanic? But we did it for the Lusitania.
Wasn't enough evidence?
Yeah.
I don't know.
And the Lusitania wasn't an American-made ship. It was a British ship.
Sure.
It was a British company. So yeah, it's just interesting to me that they would point to that, but it's kind of like, if they were willing to do it over the Lusitania, which was a British-made ship, they probably definitely would have been willing to do it over the Titanic, which was like...
I think, I would agree, and I think by now, with so many people going down and looking at the Titanic, I think people would come back up and be like, these aren't iceberg scrapes. These aren't the tearing of a hull.
Like, this is a missile.
This is a torpedo that exploded and...
well, missiles are in the air. Yeah. Torpedoes are in the water.
No worries. This is a torpedo that that destroyed this whole... Actually, really kind of cool with torpedoes. It's not the explosion that hurts the hull of a ship. It's actually the pressure difference that it creates. Oh. So essentially what happens is it explodes and it creates this big vacuum. This big... You imagine this big bubble with a whole lot of nothing inside of it, and that pulls. So it pulls on that hole. That hole just got pushed on, got really hot, it got pushed on, and then as the explosion starts to come back, everything starts to rush back in, and then gets pulled in, and that pulling... It
weakens the...
Yeah, so you get this, essentially you take a piece of... It's like if you were to take a piece of metal, push on it really hard, and then pull on it really hard, and that would cause it to break.
Gotcha. So it's like a much bigger hole than would have been made.
Probably, and the kind of damage would be completely different. You gotta think about the kind of damage you get on your car when you accidentally drive too close to something and it scrapes your paint. Sure. Right? It's gonna look more like that. You're gonna have probably
like
longer
holes.
Yeah, you're gonna have longer strips of damage versus having a hole.
A hole. Gotcha. In 1886, British writer William T. Stead published a short story titled How the Atlantic Main Steamer Went Down. In the story, the steamer collides with another vessel, and a serious shortage of lifeboats on board caused a huge loss of life. And ironically enough, Stead was on the Titanic when it went down.
Oh.
Yeah.
Coincidence.
Yeah. A medium supposedly channeled his spirit shortly after the accident.
Of course they did.
And they channeled his spirit through writing.
Mm-hmm.
Instead's daughter claimed that the medium would write with his eyes closed and that the handwriting looked much like her father's, and sometimes the medium would stop and go back and cross the T's and dot the I's, which was a habit her father had. And his daughter claims that the medium couldn't have known those things about her father, and through the medium, Stead was able to explain exactly what happened and claimed that his passage onto the other side was gloriously beautiful. Not gonna put a whole lot of stock in that, but at least, since his daughter seemed to believe it, maybe it gave her some closure.
That's good.
I'll give her that.
I hope my death has the word glorious in it.
Gloriously beautiful.
I know that, gloriously beautiful sounds pretty great.
Yeah.
But, like, just glorious. Like, if I could get the word glorious and awesome, like, gloriously awesome, like,
yeah.
that's what I want. I want to, like, that's what I want. I want a medium to come, and be like, oh, his death was gloriously awesome.
Yeah.
I don't care. Gloriously anything.
Yeah.
Yeah. It could be
gloriously shitty.
Gloriously shitty. Well, still, like, man, that was shitty, but it was gloriously shitty.
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't just regular shitty that killed him. It was gloriously shitty.
Sure.
Yeah.
All right.
Gloriously badass.
Yes.
Yes.
Gloriously gallant.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. You can die like Dallas Winston. Die gallant, Dallas. Die
gallant.
Okay. There's also a curse theory.
Of course there's a curse
theory. There's a curse theory.
Titanic
There's no
cursed.
aliens, but there's a curse.
What were they cursed by?
A mummy.
Was it?
Are you ready?
Yeah, please,
okay.
Please. I've seen the Mummy, so I know a little bit about them.
Supposedly, one of the Titanic's passengers was a historian, and he happened to be carrying the remains of an Egyptian mummy.
Did he actually?
I don't know that this is actually true.
Okay.
That's why I said supposedly.
Supposedly.
I cannot confirm that there was a historian with an actual mummy on board the Titanic.
I wouldn't be surprised if there was a historian on there, but
sure.
Yeah.
Some people believe that the remains of the mummy must have been cursed. Because, all Egyptian mummies are cursed.
All of them are.
And that's why the ship went down.
Oh.
Because you weren't supposed to take that mummy out of Egypt, damn it.
Yeah. Wait, where was the Titanic going to?
To America. He was going to New York from England.
From England. Okay. Yep. Well, yeah, that mummy took him down.
The mummy took him down. I know. I read this one and I was like, is this one even worth talking about? And then I thought about what your face would look like, and I was like, yeah, this one's worth talking about.
I mean, my face isn't doing anything crazy anymore because I'm getting so
used to it.
To the ridiculousness.
But I was just like, yeah, this is worth talking about it just for, like, the giggles.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. It was.
I don't know where mummies get their powers.
I don't know where mummies get their powers either.
So maybe it's aliens.
Maybe, just like witches. Okay.
Yeah.
Fair.
Gotta have consistency.
Yeah,
People like consistency.
Sure.
Bitches like consistency.
Jesus. Do that, bitch, a consistent.
Yeah. Do what?
Because you know what the saying is like, give that bitch a cookie, bitches love cookies. Yeah. I was thinking if a dog were to say it, because the way they talk, like dog memes, I'm like, do that, bitch, a consistent. Bitches love consistency.
Bitches love consistency.
Last theory, but not least.
Oh, okay.
Not least. Still no aliens. I'm sorry. We can go with the idea that aliens just kidnapped the whole ship and then dropped it out of the sky, and that's why it split in two and everything. And all those people that died didn't really die. They just went to human zoos.
Human zoos.
Yeah. We can go with that theory. But it wasn't one that I read about.
I mean, did they find a vortex?
No vortexes.
No vortexes.
I'm sure there's somebody out there who believes it was aliens or a vortex or something. But there's not enough stock in that one that it actually popped up in any of my research.
Oh, that's too bad. There was enough stock in the mummy one, huh?
There was enough stock in the mummy one, apparently. Yeah.
Oh, no.
Okay, so this theory says that the ship that struck the iceberg on April 14th wasn't even the Titanic.
Oh.
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
It was a fake.
It was instead her sister ship, the Olympic.
Oh.
Supposedly, the Olympic was swapped with the Titanic and sunk on purpose as part of an insurance scheme.
Okay.
On September 20th, 1911, the Olympic collided with a British Navy ship, the HMS Hawke, And the Olympic was left with 2 large holes in her starboard side and damage to a propeller shaft. White Star Line took the Royal Navy to court over the incident, but they were found at fault for the collision.
Mm-hmm.
Because White Star Line caused the accident, their insurance company refused to pay the claim on the damage to the ship.
Oh.
So White Star Line is like on the hook for thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars worth of damage, and then that ship is not getting it's not making any money right now.
No, it's useless.
Because they can't use it.
Right. So then
so they patch it up.
Yeah.
And they use, because at the time they're still building the Titanic, so they use parts that were meant for the Titanic to patch up the Olympic.
Okay.
Specifically because there was damage to a propeller shaft. People think that they took one of the propellers that was meant to be for the Titanic and put it on the Olympic.
Yeah.
Because the number coding on what has been found submerged is correct for the Titanic, but they think that the only reason it's correct is because they pulled it from the Titanic stock to put on the Olympic.
Okay. So,
does that make sense?
Yeah. So did they take numbers off the other parts and run those as well?
I don't know.
Yeah, probably not.
Anyway, so there's pictures too, of the Titanic, like, going out for her maiden voyage, and there, according to some people, there's like, sections of miscoloring on her hull where the holes on the Olympic would have been. So it's like where the patches would have been, essentially. So they're like, that is not the Titanic. Like, it says Titanic on it. That's not the Titanic. That's the Olympic.
So they think that they just took it out there to
sink it.
To sink it.
So, and it's not as ridiculous as the sink it for the 3 guys, because there was a contingency plan in place according to this theory.
Okay.
And this theory is pretty much from an author named Robin Gardner, and he wrote a book called Titanic, the Ship That Never Sank. So all of this comes from him, and there's a fairly good contingency of people who fall in line behind him. Lots of historians don't, obviously, because it's not the generally accepted what happened. But there's a large contingency of people who think that he's right.
Okay.
So they swap out the Olympic and the Titanic, so they put the name Olympic on the actual Titanic.
Okay.
They put the Titanic name on the actual Olympic. They just swap out a whole bunch of stuff.
Okay.
And they send out the Olympic with all these people on it, and they are to meet with a group of smaller rescue ships.
Ah.
Halfway through their voyage, pretty much. They're supposed to meet with a bunch of ships out there.
They sink early.
No.
No?
No.
Okay.
They're supposed to meet with these rescue ships so that all of the passengers and crew can be transferred over. They were letting the Olympic, disguised as a Titanic, take on water slowly through the whole journey.
Oh.
And then what Gardner says happens is that he doesn't think that the gash on the side of the Titanic is consistent with having hit an iceberg.
Okay.
And what he says happened is that they actually collided with one of the rescue vessels.
Oh.
And then because one of the rescue vessels was down, they weren't able to take all the people. And then the ship sank because there was a collision, which made it sink faster than what they had been planning on, because they were just going to take it out there while it was slowly letting on water and let it sink. After everybody had already been taken off of it. But because there was this collision with another vessel that was supposed to be helping them take all of the people, it sank faster and they couldn't save everybody.
Okay. So is there only one
no,
vessel
there was supposed to be several. But because the Titanic took that much damage from this collision...
Were there other vessels out there?
That's what this guy thinks.
That there were other ones out there.
Yes.
And that's how the people that did survive.
Which could explain why the people who, like, the survivors say, oh, we could see, like, spotlights in the distance, because there were other vessels out there that were supposed to meet them.
Okay, I didn't know that they said that.
I just said that a little while ago, yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I can't remember every little detail.
No, it's okay. So Gardner says that it was the Olympic, it was sank, blah-de-blah-de-blah, and that the Titanic, the real Titanic, spent 25 more years as an ocean liner named the Olympic.
You know,
and what's interesting is the Olympic ended up being, like, repurposed, so it could have been the Titanic, but the Olympic ended up being repurposed and painted up as a warship and sent out to war for World War I.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
It seems to me like it would have been a lot easier to say we're going to do a we're going to take this ship to New York, the one that we want to sink.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where it's going to fill up with its crew of people. There are parts over there. There's whatever that we need to repair it. It's going to be easier if we just take it to New York. Oh, it sank on the way there.
But the problem was that they were going to have to put thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars into that ship to get it to New York. It was never going to make it there. That was the thing. It was never going to make it to New York because it was so badly damaged that they were going to have to pay shit tons of money to make it a vessel that could actually make any journeys anymore.
What I'm saying is they do the bare minimum.
Sure.
They get it to the bare minimum, let it sink as they're trying to take it to New York. The whole idea is they should just be trying to sink, trying to get to New York like they were before, right?
Mm-hmm.
But without
anybody
the people
except
on it.
for
That's
a
the
crew,
thing that gets
only a
me.
crew, yeah.
That's the thing that gets me, is that it could have easily just been an excuse of, we've got her seaworthy, air quotes, to get her to New York. Oh, didn't happen. We're gonna claim insurance on it. You know, though I think the insurance company might you might have to have some sort of inspection for the insurance company. It just seems like that is quite the risk for a ship.
Yeah, the only thing I should have looked this up and I didn't, but I should have looked up if they actually got any insurance money from the Titanic sinking.
Yeah, I'm sure they did.
Like if they got anything for that.
I'm sure they did.
Yeah.
I mean,
the thing is that it's not unheard of to take advantage of like maritime insurance claims like that. It was not unheard of at the time that you would swap out a ship that had been damaged and say that it was another ship and sink it.
I'm not entirely surprised. I guess I just try to think that people are
not that bad.
Yeah, and they're not willing to risk people like that. But I guess I can't say that entirely.
No. Yeah.
I guess when they have no when they think nothing bad is going to happen and they have no connection to those people, sure. Yeah.
I think it's much, much, much more likely that it was a horrible accident.
As far as conspiracies go, yes. I think that's more likely.
Yeah, this is probably the most likely conspiracy, yes.
I mean, next to the mummy, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is probably the most plausible and most likely conspiracy. But I think truly what happened was it was a horrible accident. I think they were trying to see if they could break the Mauritania's record. And so they were pushing fast to get to New York. They wanted to try to make it as fast as possible.
Oh, yeah.
And it was dark, and it was cold, and they didn't see the iceberg on time, and the rest is history.
Yeah, I think if I remember correctly, something I saw on this TV special where I saw the mirages and things like that, and I'm not saying, like, oh, the TV special told me mirages, so that's gotta be the answer. Like, I have a little bit of electromagnetic frequency background, so I have an idea about how light interacts in the world with things, so it
makes sense.
It's definitely probable, and with huge temperature changes, it's highly probable. And if it were a warm night and there is cold water, glacial water, and if I remember correctly, the glaciers were not expected, they said in this TV special.
I don't know.
But
I watched it with
I don't remember. It's been a long time since I've seen it. Either way, warm water.
Night.
Real cold warmer water. Night. Real cold water. They're going to create ducting. And light isn't super susceptible to ducting, but it obviously is susceptible to it. You can tell it's susceptible to diffraction just because of a heat mirage.
It likely was not a warm night, though, because it was clear.
That's true.
Likely not warm.
Either way.
The idea was that...
When I say warm night, I mean warmer
than
air,
the water.
Colder water.
Okay,
like frigid water.
Like literally freezing water, yeah.
Literally, like, freezing water and cold air.
Yeah. Not freezing air.
Even if the air is freezing, it doesn't matter. It could be just really cold water. Anyways, I think that makes that... I do truly think, like, what I've seen on that, I think that is the most probable. I agree with you. I think they were trying to beat a record. They were trying to say, we're the biggest ship with the biggest haul of people, if you will, and we made
29 boilers, and
we made it so much faster than anybody else. And they said, well, the ship's unsinkable. Even if we know there's icebergs out here,
it's
who cares?
Unsinkable.
We're gonna bump into them and we'll be fine.
Because we're state of the art and we've thought of everything except the fucking walls.
But you hadn't. You hadn't thought of everything.
Yep.
I hadn't thought of everything. Yeah.
4 days. 4 days it got out in the water. That's it.
Yeah.
And it sank. It's nuts.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
I don't think it's anything ridiculous. I usually don't think it's anything ridiculous.
I don't normally believe things are the ridiculous thing.
I do think that it's entirely possible that it could have been an insurance thing.
Scheme. It just sucks to think that, because it sucks to think that people are that bad.
I think something like that would have come up already and been addressed and fixed. I think that's one of those things where records would have shown, or they would have looked at the parts on the ship and been like, oh, these parts don't match.
The problem is that it's been under for so long that there's probably not a lot you could do to prove that, because you can't go back and be like, oh, can we find the holes that would have been patched on the Olympic, because those holes could have come from anything at this point.
Sure, and I agree with that, but what I'm saying is I think that based on the fact that they can pull off numbers on propeller shafts, that they can pull numbers off other things too.
Sure.
And why wouldn't they have? But
there you have it.
Yeah, there you have it. So
you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at TTIS Podcast. You can email us at thetruthissomewhere at thetruthissomewherepodcast@gmail.com. You can find us anywhere that you can listen to a podcast. So if you're listening on something and you want to listen on something else, it's probably there too.
Yep.
You can, if you want to support the podcast, you can support us by rating, liking, subscribing on any of those podcast apps. And you can support us over on Patreon, where you get video of this and bonus content like bloopers, and if we watch any kind of movies that have anything to do with this and we talk about that, or really just anything we want to talk about and record ourselves talking about it. And
Threadless.
You can get merch on thetruthissomewhere.threadless.com, and you can find our show notes on thetruthissomewhere.com. That's it. The truth is somewhere, guys. Keep looking.
See ya.